Kate, if you want to get us started.
I would be happy to. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be. Thank you for joining today's It's Okay webcast. Our topic today is about building successful connections in relationships and how critical these are to our mental health. Our host today is Michael Landsberg. Michael is a longtime Canadian sports journalist and broadcaster who founded the nonprofit #SickNotWeek, which is a mental health community dedicated to ending the stigma around mental health. He is a prolific speaker on the topics of mental health and well-being. This is Michael's third event with us, and we're so happy to have him back. We're also joining us today is Dr. George James, LMFT, which LMFT stands for Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist. In addition to his clinical expertise, Dr. James is also a well-known author and speaker who provides counsel on overcoming relationship struggles and building healthy and successful connections in love, family, and career. And we are very excited to learn from Dr. James today. And with that, I will hand this over to you both, Michael and Dr. James.
Thanks, Kate. And thank you once again for having me. We had a discussion for the last 10 minutes, both Dr. James and I, very excited to be here, and he's going to say how excited he is. So I'm going to top him no matter what. This is awesome. I can't believe how exciting this is, which is actually true for me, Dr. James. Obviously, I'm kind of kidding. How are you?
I'm doing well, Michael. And yes, I'm excited. I'm just looking forward to a great conversation, not only between you and I, but with everyone here. And there's so much that we will cover. We will not have enough time, but I'm gonna have a good time doing this.
Have I seen you like for real on CBS?
You see me on CBS mornings, probably.
Yeah.
Out there in December, and I've been on the Today Show, thankfully, 13 times, and looking for number 14.
Very cool. Well, we're lucky to have you. And let's not only try to make a difference in people's lives, but let's try to have a little bit of fun while doing so. How about that?
Let's do it.
By the way, you have a great speaking voice, and I'm a little self-conscious. I like to have the best speaking voice, but I don't. So now I'm going to start talking a little bit more like this just because I can.
Well,
I want to talk to you.
Point one. Don't worry, you'll get more points as we go along. I'll take that as my point one.
Point one, put it on the board. I called this the Goldilocks theory. And stay tuned later on in this hour, we'll have the three little pigs theory as well. But by Goldilocks, I mean, this is too hot. This is too cold. But we're shooting for this is just right. Balance, I would say, would be probably the most relevant word that that we have when it comes to the important issues of today. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Michael, I love it. Goldilocks will definitely be a good thing to be able to talk about. And and the thought of like what is just right, what is a way to figure out what is just right for you, for me, and it's different. And balance is one of those words that people share so often and talk about, oh, I have to balance my life. And so let me clearly say what I believe about balance. I learned this actually from a mentor many years ago, that balance is not 50-50. It's not equal. It's not that it's static. Balance is actually always in motion, right? So that it's never something that you just achieve and it's over. Things are always fluctuating. Maybe you have things you have to do with your kids, or maybe there's an extra project you have to work late at you have on the job. There's something going on with your partner. There's things that are always in motion. But the challenge, I think, for so many people is that we often leave one or two things that we're not taking care of or putting attention or invest in time in, and then that gets out of whack and it impacts everything else. My belief is it's all a system. So if two things fall on the ground, it affects the things that you think are you're holding up. So balance is really trying to find a way how to navigate all those things. That means you got to put attention in some of those places, including what we'll talk about more today, your love life, which is romantic and family.
There's so many areas that, as you were talking, I was thinking about like all the different areas that where balance is relevant. It's, work to home balance, right? At home, especially in a partnership, between two people, whether it's marriage or any other way you would describe it. Finding that balance, I think is more of a challenge. Would you agree with me if I said that some of us are naturally assertive and some of us lack assertiveness, which can create real imbalance in a relationship?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about two parts. Just a quick story. Just yesterday, I was talking with a client, a couple I work with, and they were just talking about just their schedules. They have 4 kids, and they have a pretty demanding work life. And their balance is trying to figure out their calendar, trying to navigate and have a conversation about who's doing what and when and where. And sometimes when they don't have that conversation, it throws them in a really bad place. And so a lot of us, it is those things. Are we having the conversation? Are we communicating? And what keeps us sometimes from communicating, maybe even on the job with our supervisor or coworker or at home in the community? There are things that sometimes keep us from communicating. And I think that's what you highlighted, is the thought of what does it mean to be assertive? The definition I like to use is that it is the ability to ask for what you want and need. So you got to ask yourself, and I have to ask myself often, am I asking for what I want and need in this situation? Am I speaking up for myself? And where did I learn not to speak up for myself? There's lots of variables, right? Sometimes because of where you grew up, sometimes because of gender or sexual orientation, or lots of things about us can sometimes tell us not to speak up, not to ask for those things, and we might not be assertive. So there might be ways where we're assertive, maybe with our children, we're able to tell them what we want and need, but we're maybe not able to do it with our coworker or with our spouse or partner. And it's ability to find a way to be assertive in as many places in your life as possible, because people don't know what you want or need if you don't tell them.
Right. And assertiveness can vary, right? I could be potentially, assertive in my relationship with my kids. I could be assertive in my relationship with my partner, perhaps. But then when I try to apply that to work, all of a sudden now I have insecurities when it comes to that. I have the fear that that I'll be replaced by someone if I'm overly assertive. Is it possible to be assertive in one area and not so assertive in another?
Yeah, 100%. Easy example, right? Like you and I have had opportunities to be on TV, and maybe, those things are just kind of normal, and it's not, it produces some butterflies and some anxiety, but not as much. While I know other people, that is the biggest fear that they might have, to speak in front of other people. And so maybe you have to do a presentation at your work, or maybe it's your kids have something that they're doing, and it can bring up anxiety in any place. And that's usually what sometimes keeps us from being assertive, is that we're a little bit anxious or a little bit overwhelmed in the moment. And if we've had maybe some opportunities where it didn't go the way that we wanted, and we remember those moments, sometimes that comes as a flashback. And the negative thoughts, I'm really big on the story we tell ourselves. Those negative thoughts start to tell us that it's not going to go well, they're not going to hear us, or they don't really like us or love us. And that sometimes keeps us from being assertive, because we're either anxious, or we're feeling something from the past, or we're just maybe overwhelmed altogether.
It's overwhelming when you have the more dimensions to your life, the more overwhelming it is, right? Because you can be pulled in not just two different directions like home and work, but there's other places that you can have responsibilities. And all of a sudden now it can create, to me, a huge amount of stress internally when you feel like, okay, well, this is my livelihood. This is how I support my family. I've got to put work first. Wait a second here. I've got a family, and ultimately my happiness and the devotion that I show to them will dictate their happiness. So I've got to be all in for them. How do you deal with the conflict of being needed in two different places?
Michael, that's such an important question, and I think we all feel it in different ways. I'm going to be stereotypical for a little bit. I think stereotypically men, or maybe the men that I've known, start to feel the pressure that I need to do a lot and provide for the family. And some of that mindset has been changing over the years, by the way. But this thought of like, I need to go out, conquer, provide, and build for my family. But the way that I do that could actually take me away from my family, take me away from being present and being in direct relationship with my family. So there has to be this push and pull, this struggle of maybe sometimes I don't do the overtime. Maybe we really need it and it's really important, but maybe that would be our child's recital or a baseball game or even a time to go on a date with my spouse or partner. That it is that push and pull. And once again, it's not just men. I see this with everybody, but I wanted to kind of give that example of some of that struggle that we might feel, that we have to be in one area, but we could sometimes, once again, going back to balance, not being intentional or focusing on the other aspect that we need. And it's not always as simple as just two things. Sometimes it's three or four, as you mentioned.
You find that most people, the majority of people, unless they've done the kinds of things that we're doing now, talking about it, that they have a tough time naturally finding the best balance for themselves and for others, that this is not necessarily something that's innate for most of us.
I don't think it's innate for the majority of the world. And some of that is like, I don't know about for you, Michael, but for me growing up, we didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about balance. We didn't talk about those things. My parents were hardworking Jamaican immigrants, and they did the best that they could, and they worked hard, and I valued that. I learned hard work. I learned about faith. I learned about kindness, but we weren't talking about mental health and mental wellness. And so I think that, and when I've worked with people from all different backgrounds, I hear similar stories. There's only a small percentage of people who will say, yes, I learned that growing up. So I don't think it's natural for us to have these conversations, but I'm grateful for seminars and forums like this because it becomes an intervention. It becomes an opportunity to say, it is okay. We can talk about this. We do need to talk about it. And then we start to change the narrative. Now, maybe I'm having this conversation at home. Maybe I'm having this conversation with my children. That's what I've been able to do because of what I've learned as a therapist. Now I'm having that conversation at home with my children that hopefully they embrace and are able to do it more in their future.
I grew up in an amazing home with parents that were totally devoted to me in every way. But we didn't talk about mental health. I never had any idea what depression was. I never knew anybody who took their own lives because no one ever talked about it. And that became an issue for me because I have experienced anxiety since I can first remember. And my brother experienced the same thing, but we never talked about it. So here we are, we were best friends, sleeping during the summer because one room had an air conditioner, side by side, both tortured by anxiety. And we never mentioned it. He went on to become a kidney doctor, a nephrologist, brilliant guy, but he was addicted to alcohol and to pills to try to self-medicate himself. We never talked about it. And because he was like that, I felt like I couldn't do anything wrong, that I had to please my parents because my brother, from his drinking, was causing them grief. Would you say that you see this quite often, people being a pleaser? Like, I see myself as a pleaser, which to some extent sounds good, right? Like, I like to make other people happy, but sometimes I leave myself behind.
Yeah, Michael, thanks for sharing that part of you. And, once again, there's so many ways that when I look back, there were people in my life that were anxious. There were people in my life that were depressed. There were people in my life that were struggling, and they never shared it. Even and how it showed up even in their families, in their relationships. I think that's even part of my pull that brought me into wanting to be a therapist, was seeing people that said they wanted to be connected not really embrace that, but there was so much more underneath that. And to your point of being a pleaser, there are these roles that we play, and we play these roles. And at many points in my life, I was a pleaser. I wanted to make my parents proud. I wanted them to know that their hard work and sacrifice really resulted in something. I wanted to please them. And I would see friends make choices, and some of my friends, they were the scapegoats, or the one, the rebel, or the one that felt insecure. I've known people where they feel like they are not good enough, and then their actions start to show that, where they start to make choices that really aren't the best. And so when we play or have these roles, going back to the story we tell ourselves, that I have to be a pleaser because my brother is the one that is causing a lot of negative attention, or I have to be a pleaser so that my parents feel value, even though they might not have a lot of money in education. There's a story that is there, and we carry the story out at work, in our romantic lives, in our family, in the community. And if we're not aware of it, if we don't kind of really reflect and pay attention, or have interventions like this, or therapy, or something else, those negative stories can actually send us off the track and create really negative results. And so it's really important that we pay attention to, what role am I playing? And if we want to go deep, why am I playing that role?
Doc, you got to help me out here. I mentioned the air conditioner, and my brother had it in his room. I guess I've carried this resentment all my life, that I had to move to his room. He didn't have to move to my room because I didn't have an air conditioner. Has that shaped my life?
Well, it might have shaped your life, and there's a lot of things that sometimes we need to carry that chip on our shoulder. Like, there's some points where I tell people, right, if something negative has happened, or even if I feel like I got shunned in a way that I didn't really like, I just say, you know what, I'm going to show you in my own actions. I'm going to show you by being successful. To me, I've heard that many years ago, that look, success is going to be the way that I show you that you made a mistake. And in case of that, well, look who's been on TV. Look who's doing the big things now, right? Kidney doctor, that's not a big thing. I mean, whatever. Like, he still has a lot of weight.
You know why I say that? Because we have two of them, right? So, technically, we don't have a lot of organs that have duplicates. So my brother's in the organ duplicate area, where somebody's got two of them, not one of them. I'm wondering, I'd like to ask you, because I spend my time now talking about mental health. And I have found, in terms of relationships, and in terms of understanding, and in terms of balance, that one of the most disruptive things is when one partner is battling a mental health challenge, like depression or like anxiety, or any of the other sort of most common mental health challenges. You must see a lot of couples in your waiting room, and then in your office. One is really struggling with something and the other is not. Do you see a lot of that? And what are the kinds of things that you feel like you need to offer them?
Yeah, actually, I do. And so, just to give a little bit of background, I've been fortunate enough to be a therapist for 20 plus years. And I've worked with people from all different backgrounds, all different situations, class levels. I usually say race, class, gender, sexual orientation, faith, ability. I've worked with people in any of those areas in all different kind of ways. And couples have been one of the kind of core places that I've been able to do my work. And I've seen couples come in where one person maybe is dealing with a physical illness. And what does that mean for the other person? What does that mean for the relationship? I've worked with folks where one person maybe has more money in their family or in their life than the other. And what does that do? I've also seen people who are dealing with some type of mental health challenge. One person is a little bit more anxious, or is dealing with depression, or has had a history of depression or experiencing depression throughout their life. And once, I believe in a system. So if one person is feeling it, it impacts the partner, it impacts the family, it impacts the community, the neighborhood, everyone who is connected, it impacts us, right? There's a saying, African proverb, I am because of who we are, right? Ubuntu, right? This thought of like that, because of what happens with you, it impacts me. And so I see that with the couples I work with. And oftentimes, going back to being assertive, people are not having the conversation. They're not able or willing to say, babe, this is hard, or I don't know what you need from me right now, or you seem different and I don't know what to say. They end up holding it in. They end up getting frustrated and taking it out on either their partner or someone else, where they show up at work and they're grumpy and they're having a bad day, but it really started at home. So there's a lot that's really there, and it's a whole system. And we have to just recognize that what happens to our partner or what happens to us impacts other people.
What would you suggest to this couple that we're talking about? One has depression, right? Depression is, I think, depression and anxiety certainly would be the two most common mental illnesses, which common does not mean not devastating. We know how devastating depression can be. What would you say to the person who has the depression, to the person who doesn't have depression? What should the depressed person say when he or she feels like, I'm not understood, that you think you understand me, but you don't? And we have a big problem because I feel like you have no idea what kind of life I'm living.
Yeah. Oftentimes what happens, say for the person who is experiencing depression, is that it's heavy, it's overwhelming. It takes so much energy sometimes just to show up, just to maybe even get out of bed. And their partner, their spouse might not actually know that. They might not even know really what depression is. They might have seen it on or heard it on TV, but maybe not really had relationship with it. So that person, I would really encourage you, maybe as hard as it might feel, to really describe what depression is for you and what that is. So just from my clinical background, what I often ask people is, tell me, how's your sleep been in the past 2 weeks? Are you sleeping more or less? Tell me about your appetite. Are you eating more or less? Are you feeling more irritable or moody? Are you feeling levels of hopelessness? These are all parts of what people experience when they're going through some aspect of depression. But in the lived experience also, they feel just drained, fatigued. Like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to get up. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to go to this activity. And their partner just sees them not doing it. And their partner feels like, are you being lazy? Are you giving up on me? And so that's where the communication becomes really important, to say, I'm not just dialing it in. I'm not just giving up. I'm actually feeling a lot, and it doesn't seem like it, but I can barely operate, move, think. And so that conversation, I think, can really start to change the dynamic between the two.
Yeah, I just want to show you that I know African proverbs as well, because as I like to say, a roaring lion kills no game.
That's
Just
right.
think about it for a second, okay? That's all. Just think about it for a second.
All right, that's point two. That you get your point for that one. I give you that one.
Examine what is said, not who is speaking. Point three. I'm wondering if we could just sort of a little bit of role playing here. One of the most common things that I know, from being in the workplace, having a job that sometimes placed unusual demands on me, and having a family that I like to believe I was 100% devoted to. But you can't devote 100% of yourself to anything if you're going to do two things. If someone feels like they need more space, more understanding from their employer, whether it's their supervisor, their boss, whatever you would call that person, but they're really afraid to step up, and they think they might be making themselves vulnerable if they ask for too much. How would you suggest somebody phrases it when they're worried that work is putting unfair demands on them, and their family's missing out on them?
That's so important, and that comes up in so many ways. And I think especially in this time period where a lot of companies and organizations are trying to move forward, are trying to maybe get back on track after the impact of the pandemic. And so there's a lot of need for, like, we got to get this work done, or we got to get to a certain place, or we got to hopefully get to a place of maybe being profitable again, or whatever their goals might be. And so there can feel like there's a demand there. And at the same time, I've seen so many families, so many people who are saying, I am just overwhelmed and I need a lot, or I actually enjoyed the time that we got to spend when we were on lockdown, or when we were on hybrid, and I don't want to give that up. That was my story, right? Like I enjoyed and still enjoy just the touch points I've had with my family more, and I've had to make some career shifts to be able to maintain that. And so when we talk about vulnerability, it is scary. It is overwhelming to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there, to say that I want to be with my family or that my family needs me. And that might mean I need to not be at work as much or do as much overtime or change some things up. It is scary. So first, admit it. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with being nervous or scared. That is actually normal and human. And then from there, what I really love to do, let's go back to some of these. It's not a proverb, but what I believe is in the community, in the tribe, in the people that we surround ourselves with can be very important. So before I even would go to your boss or supervisor, who are the people that you can talk to? For me, I have a mentor, I have my spouse, I have trusted friends, I have colleagues that I would kind of try it out with them first and get a little bit more comfortable and really dial into what is it that I'm really asking for, and maybe get their thoughts. Do you think so and so would hear this or go with it? Or you've heard me talk about them. What are your thoughts? And then third, then I would approach that person and have ask them for some time to have the conversation, and then go and do it. And their response will let you know, are they trying to balance the needs of the company as well as taking care of you? Are they only thinking about one thing? And then you then now get to make a choice and decision. I'm not saying that you need to leave the job. I'm not saying that you need to not be there for your family, but it gives you some options to try to think about what might be next.
Dr. James, do you find that people show up in your office and they really don't know what they want? That they really, I mean, they may feel miserable, but not have any reason why. And if you ask them, okay, well, like what would be the greatest thing that, what would you love? What would be success for you? What would make you happy? They don't even know.
Yeah, I think many of us don't really kind of know. I mean, like you have all these things that are being thrown at us, right? We see things on TV, social media, we see other things and we think maybe that's it, or maybe that's what we want. And sometimes we don't know it until it happens, right? I didn't know how much I was missing touch points with my kids, right? For instance, I would work really long hours. I would come home late. Sometimes by the time I would get home, they would already be asleep. I knew that internally. I knew that I was missing that, but it wasn't until we're playing soccer in the middle of the day or we're having opportunities where I'm playing tag with my 10-year-old son in between my work and my sessions that's now let me say, like, I like that. That's what I need. And so sometimes it's not until we're really there and see it. And in my office, sometimes it's not until people engage in the conversation where I'm asking them, well, what does it feel like when you're around your family? Or what does it feel like when you go on a date? When was the last time you went on a date? What, you haven't been on a date in like how long? Or even when I ask folks, well, when's the last time you had sex? Like, when's the last time you connected with your partner? Really? How come? What is getting in the way of that? And it is in those conversations that people start to realize, I want it, or maybe I don't want it, or I need it, or maybe I don't need it, that it allows that to unfold for people. And that is the process that I just enjoy, helping people get to the place of saying, like, aha, it was just yesterday. I was working on some of the stuff I do is also executive coaching. I was working with someone and just through our series of conversations, he's like, this is why I feel frustrated by this employee, right? And because he figured that out, he then was able to come up with a way to deal with it because he had that conversation.
You mentioned before that men don't talk as well as women talk when it comes to, like important things, deeper things. You and I would be, more apt probably to talk about, you're an Eagles fan, Jalen Hurts. Is he going to, like, are you shocked at how good he is? As a matter of fact, let's talk about that. And then let's talk about the 1993 World Series when the Blue Jays beat your Philadelphia Phillies.
Oh,
Let's
you had
talk
to go
about
there.
that.
It's all right. It's
I
okay.
did. It's my job.
I wasn't a fan then, but I still feel the hurt.
Is it true, first of all, that sharing deeper things comes more naturally to women? And if that's the case, how do you deal with that imbalance?
First of all, I have lots of excitement about the Eagles this season, and Jalen Hurts proved himself last year, and I think we got a good group, and I'm looking forward to this year. So, but there isn't a Canadian football team. Oh, that we actually really play. Oh, maybe one
Oh.
day they'll level up to where we are. It's okay. You're not there yet, but yeah, the Blue Jays will take it. But yeah, I think there are so many ways that people do show up in my office, in my experience, and then when we talk about just men, I think that it was maybe of the people who are maybe my generation and a little bit older, that was like an automatic. If you said that men don't really share, don't really open up, they're probably going. And just to be clear, I'm a Xer. And so boomers on up, maybe some Xers, maybe some end of the millennial kind of generation. But when you go down, like younger millennials to Z's, like there are ways that they are actually learning and showing that it's okay to be a stay-at-home dad. It's okay to open up. It's okay to cry. It's okay to do those things as someone who identifies as a man. And I think those things are shifting, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think I don't think it's like in the DNA. I think it's what we learn and what is taught. I struggled so much with, I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, and I struggled with all the different messages that I learned growing up as a young boy, and how do I shape that for my son? How do I help him to be strong and to be tough, but how do I also help him to be open and to be vulnerable, and all at the same time? And sometimes I don't know if I got it right, but I was trying to mix all of those messages for him so that he didn't get some of the nonsense I got.
Yeah, I mean, we are. What was your African proverb? I really liked it.
I am because of who we are.
Right. And, in so many ways I am because of who I was, right, as a kid. And do you find that it's easier to deal with people that come into your office? The younger they are, the less entrenched, maybe not so much mistakes, but the challenges they are having and the reasons for them. Does it get harder to change over time?
We all there's challenges no matter which way or what time period we come in. I think with some of the younger folks, they are more aware of their emotional and mental health needs, which I love. At the same time, what a lot of people have said is some have not had the full experiences of what it means to kind of push through or work through or fight through. And so that's some of the skills that they're developing, versus like some of the older generation, that's all the message they got. Just like, get over it, move on. But they didn't get the message, it's okay to feel. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to take a time out. So when I'm working with younger folks, for instance, it is helping them own what they're feeling, but also come up with strategies of how they can move forward. That doesn't mean you have to stop or give up or that it's over, that you can figure it out and that you have support. And that's the place that I support them with and provide for them in that way.
What do you see the most of now in your office?
Yeah, I think like right now, I think lots of couples are just trying to navigate the demands, like we talked about before, the balance of all the things that are going on in their life. I think the individuals, I think they're trying to figure out like, what is the right path forward for me? Like, how do I date? How do I make sure I'm there for my family? How do I show up at work? All these things. And that's a really key part of my work, is balancing love, which can be romantic and family and business. And so a lot of folks are thinking through that. And I think the biggest part that I'm seeing is the layer of feeling anxious or depressed or some level of mental health challenge on top of that. And that has been really, challenging for so many people.
What is the role of leadership now? And I'm speaking specifically in the workplace at Cummins. I mean, almost everybody has a boss, except for the boss at the very top. but almost everyone has a boss. And if you are somebody's boss, then you have a lot of responsibility to take care of the whole person, not to just have them be productive. Where does leadership fall when you talk about creating balance in a relationship that, perhaps isn't balanced by definition?
Yeah, so for lots of organizations and companies, and specifically to Cummins, I think one, being able to have something like this is saying, we care about you as a whole person. It's okay, right? So many companies are not doing that. So many companies are not saying that we care about you as a whole person. We're going to take this hour out to talk about your life, your loved ones, your family, your relationships. That is sending a clear message that we care about you as a whole person. And what I would encourage even further is this thought of psychological safety, that many companies have not been psychologically safe, meaning create an environment that people can show up and say, and not be full of anxiety of saying, I really need to be there more with my family. I have to leave right away. I can't stay. That there's a level of safety for me to say that, versus the thought of I could lose my job, right? That is not a really trusting environment. And so I think it's really being intentional that people are more than just workers. They are fathers and mothers. They are sisters and brothers. They are sons and daughters. They are community leaders. They are loved ones. They are partners. They are spouses. And that if we can see people as a whole in all of these different parts of them, and pay attention to that and show up for them and offer opportunities for them, that then makes them more connected and loyal to the company. Cummins really thought about me, or looked out for me, or created an environment for me, or helped me learn something that made my life and family better. And therefore, I appreciate Cummins. And I'm going to talk about Cummins in a positive way. We all know some people who talk about their job in a really negative way. They talk about their bosses, or they talk about the people they work with, and they can't wait to get out of that environment. But when we think about people as a whole in these multiple ways, and we do that from the top down, and we show that and we model that, people show up at work differently. They're actually more productive. There's studies that even prove that. But for whatever reason, so many companies don't do it.
Right. And I think that just to really put an emphasis, because people watching today, are in positions of leadership. And I'm gathering, I don't work at Cummins, but I'm gathering that it's a pretty forward-thinking place. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't be on talking about this. But I'm wondering, there's a link that has been created between mentally healthy people at work and all the factors that go into making someone good at their job, or the converse. You can be there every single day, but you may not be producing what you're capable of producing because you're not mentally healthy. And I'm not just talking about mental illness. Life and mental illness sometimes are pretty difficult to differentiate, right? Because they have the same symptoms, each one. But I'm talking about just overall happiness. A happier worker is a more productive worker. Is that correct?
That is, I believe, 100% correct. And I've seen that. And there's a couple things with that. So from the worker side, what are the things that are keeping me from being happy? And so there's this talk and seminar that I give called I Give Myself Permission. And some of that is about how do we give ourselves permission to be happy, to enjoy our love lives and our family members, to be more engaged, that sometimes for whatever reason, we're saying ourselves no, right? If we were to use the example, when you said your brother had the air conditioner and you didn't, some people could take that story further and say, I'm not supposed to get good things in my life. And they stop giving themselves permission to maybe go out and buy a gift for you or your loved one, or do something nice, or go to a nice restaurant, because you've been telling yourself this story for so long. So happiness at work and at home starts with us and internally. And it starts, what I believe, by giving yourself permission to say, it's okay for me to be happy. For me, that was seeing my parents and my mother in particular work so hard, but never really go on real vacations, that they would not give themselves permission to say it's okay to just enjoy life. And so my family and I, we believe in that. And we try to create memories by going to places, by giving ourselves permission to do that. It starts there. Then as a company or as leaders, how do we give ourselves permission to be different, to be forward thinking, to be innovative, to be a culture that people want to work there worldwide and say that this is a place that I want to be connected to? But we have to give ourselves permission to be that and not feel like we have to be like other people.
I mentioned a few seconds ago, and I want to find out because I'm really interested in this. So this is kind of like a personal question, but a question that's relevant in everyone's life, and that is the question of, life and illness. When does life experience turn to illness? Sadness, for instance, is an inevitability in all of our lives, right? But depression, the illness, is not an inevitability in all of our lives. We don't all go through it. I look at it that my dad died about 1.5 years ago. That makes me sad, but it doesn't make me depressed. As we're speaking to individuals now who may be asking themselves, where am I at in my head, especially coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah.
How do you distinguish between what's just life, just a crappy time, and something that really needs to be treated?
Yeah, Michael, I think there's some of us that just the way our bodies and DNA is wired are more likely to experience depression or anxiety just because of just body chemistry and so forth, that we're already like kind of hardwired for the possibility. We're more closer than maybe some others. And given a set of circumstances, that can get triggered and can happen. And so there's some people, they've been experiencing anxiety from a young age. They've been experiencing depression from a young age, or they've experienced it multiple times. While some people, it feels random. They've never felt it before. They don't even know what is happening with me. Why do I feel this way? Why am I so nervous or so overwhelmed or feeling so low and sad? And yeah, you could be experiencing some stuff, and it could be most likely triggered by life situations. So many people with the pandemic they never felt anxious before, but now they understand it a little bit. They never felt depressed before, but now they do. And in my belief, I think almost all of us at some point will experience some form of anxiety or some form of depression. But some of us, it's not just once, it's not just for a short period of time. It is something we have to navigate and manage. And that's where, no matter where you are practicing, the 3 things I often share to folks: do I have someone I can talk to? Am I getting good physical activity? And if need be, am I also talking to a psychiatrist that might also help and support with medication? Those things tend to at least help people going in the right way, help people to feel like, whether it's life or it is clinical, that I am working through it and moving to a better place.
Wow, that is a really good answer. And man, I mean, I only met you before on a call before this, but this is gold. I mean, I appreciate it. Michelle, are you going to jump in with a question? I just saw your camera pop up.
Hey, so this is we've got lots of questions coming in. So if you guys are ready, we can move on to some Q&A. Great talk so far. So we can get started on our first question. So first question being around, I was raised being called my mother's problem-free child because I was mostly always well-behaved, but I carried the label with me into adulthood, eventually making it difficult for me to be comfortable with my own imperfections and weaknesses. Any advice on how to reverse that?
Wow, that's a really great and powerful question. I think the first part is that you're so self-aware. I mean, our emotional intelligence sometimes can waver, but the first part of anything is, are we aware of what's happening? So now you're aware of it. The next part is, when does that get triggered? What are the moments where you find yourself struggling with like being asking for things or moving forward with things, or maybe kind of shaking the boat a bit or rocking the boat a bit? Those are the moments that become your trigger points. And then you have a choice. And what I say to people is, try to practice that in safer environments, maybe with friends or family, and then you just expand from there. That's how you kind of start to change it. Now, you don't have to change all of it. Doesn't mean what you've done is bad, but you can shift it a bit so that you know what you're doing when you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly the same question or a similar question that I asked you, right? I have become a pleaser through my life because I never wanted to provide my parents with anything that would be grief related. And as a result, I go about my day, like literally go about my day trying to make other people happy. When, because of my job, people recognize me from TV. And when I get stopped, I'm always focused on giving them full value on this little conversation we're having. And my wife will sometimes say, well, like, why are you being so nice to someone you don't know? And it's like, okay, I think you explained it.
Which makes you a great person until it interferes, right? Like, people experience that in a great way. That's why I don't get rid of it, but be aware of like, okay, sometimes maybe not today.
Yeah, I hear you. But it's challenging to make changes that are so deeply rooted in who we are, as you have expressed so well in a number of different ways. Michelle.
So next question is, need some advice on how to build a community in a new place. I am a single dad, moved to a new city about 2 years ago. I'm currently struggling to make friends and build a community with work in my 2-year-old. I am an extrovert and people energize me.
First of all, I think this is a great forum for that. Whomever that is, I know it's anonymous, but if you ever wanted to just say like, hey, even anonymously, I'm in this area. Is anyone else in that area? And I think like what I've learned already about Cummins is that there's people everywhere. And so you can start with like your work community. You can reach out in other places, like go back to maybe your friends and family and ask, does anyone know people in this particular area? I mentioned right at the beginning of the call, I traveled to South Africa, not in May. And before I left, I just kept asking people, do they know folks? And I was surprised how many people just started saying, oh, I know someone who lives there. And when I went, I already had a small community. So some of it is being able and willing to ask the questions. Does anyone know anyone in this area or surrounding area? Is anyone willing to like connect or tell me about someone that they know about? Are there events that I can go to? And find the thing that is comforting for you. If you're a basketball player, find a basketball league. If you're a person of faith, go to that particular faith institution or place of worship. Whatever it is that you like and are connected to, find that in the new place, and that will help you to build community.
I want to apply what you just said to mental health talk. If you are in an environment with a group of 12 people, say at work, and you don't speak about mental health, because typically people don't speak about mental health. If you want to create conversation, it's so simple, yet it's so difficult for most people to accept. Just start the conversation by saying, we don't talk about depression. And my nephew is really struggling, or I'm really struggling. And you find, as you were saying with basketball or with religion, you find that there's a common bond with almost everyone when it comes to that one topic. Almost every person has someone in their life that they care about who's battling a mental illness. And it's just a great way. So Cummins, this is my advice, and I'm not a professional like the doctor, but I'm going to say this. Sometime in the near future, in a conversation with a group, just say something about mental health that's personal. Either you or somebody you care about, and it will change the course of conversation.
Great. Next question we have is, how do you deal with attention seekers?
I love that question in so many ways. One, it's really what I hear about that is the attention seeker causing some challenge or difficulty? Because it might not necessarily be a problem. You might be able to say like, okay, that's that person being them, and so be it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Just to jump in, first of all, to prove I am an attention seeker, and second of all, how would you define attention seeker? I think that's really important before you give us the explanation. What's an attention seeker?
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I was thinking, is that attention seeker might be someone who takes up a lot of space, who maybe interrupts, or maybe says more and doesn't maybe give room for other people. Sometimes this might be someone who talks a lot or often, or someone who's just saying things to just get attention, right? Now, once again, it doesn't mean those things are all bad, but if this person is causing challenge to you or your work environment, being able to maybe have a conversation with them could be good. Being able to then find out what is happening for you. What are you doing when you feel like they're attention seeking? Are you being more quiet? Are you being more withdrawn? Maybe you can say to yourself, I can speak up, I can share, I can assert myself. So that way it's not really about the other person, but it's about what I'm doing.
Hey, Michelle.
Yep. So next question is, I like this. It says, what, because I need this too. What is a daily practice we can incorporate in our lives to build better relationships?
Oh, I love that. When I think about the relationships that matter to me in my life, I think about, am I investing time? So sometimes daily practice could be, who in your life can you make sure you reach out to? Maybe it's a friend, you send them a message or call them or text them. Maybe it's your partner or spouse. Did you have a moment to have a conversation? You know, there's a study that says that couples spend about 5 minutes a day with each other total, right? That is not a lot of time. So it's like, are we spending more than 5 minutes together? Are we going on walks? Are we going on date nights? For your children, are we, so the daily practice is invest in time. Just as today, I'm going to text or check in with somebody. I'm going to make sure I'm putting in some time. Other than that, it's also making sure that you create the space in your life. Sometimes we can be overscheduled. So maybe create a break in your life, or say that, you know, after work, I'm going to make sure I do this. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to seek out some time with somebody else. And the other part of just the mental wellness is I want to take some time to just reflect, to be grateful, to be mindful. And that sometimes can help us in how we show up with other people.
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah, absolutely. We have two questions here, and so I'll try to kind of summarize them, because I think they talk about a really important topic, and it's about I would say young adults to older kids, and the questions are around, how do we encourage young adults, older kids, you know, that are our children, and helping them kind of give them courage and confidence to kind of get out there. It seems like in both these questions, they're maybe a little bit more you know, they're in their room playing a lot of video games, or they're not being really driven in their life. And one kind of question, and maybe to answer this, is how do you approach that conversation that doesn't feel like you're, you know, demeaning or you know, and lifting them up, but then also how can you continue to support them in that?
Yeah, going back to, you know, something that Michael brought up earlier, is that sometimes what we see is not really what's happening underneath, right? So we might see our young folks playing games or on screens, but underneath they're really anxious and they're dealing with maybe some social anxiety, maybe just feeling overwhelmed, maybe sometimes not fitting in. So sometimes the solution is, how do we help them deal with that anxiety? How do we support them? Oftentimes as parents, and I am often struggling with this and having to work on this, we often try to say or tell our child or children what to do, but we don't necessarily do it with them, right? So it might be, hey, let's go do this together, or let's figure out something. Let's go for a walk. Let's go read a book together. Let's play a game, a sport, or whatever. Let's do it together versus trying to tell them what to do. And also ask them, how are you feeling? What is challenging for you? Maybe being able to hear from them, you might get a full story. And then for those who are just really, that's all they do, they kind of focus on the game, on the screen or the game, maybe being able to say like, hey, let's switch it up, or let's find some other things, and you can create some boundaries that will help them in doing that. And then when they get the free time, go do something with them.
I think if I could add my amateurish 2 cents to that, I think that talk is obviously hugely important, you know, for every question that's being asked today, but especially, you know, in the home at the dinner table. I always refer to the dinner table because that's in many families, that's where people gather, and sometimes the only place that people gather. You know, make it part of the discussion, the things that are a little bit deeper than perhaps you're even comfortable with. You know, parents will talk to their kids about sex and safe sex and drinking and driving and bullying and all of these things. But, you know, the biggest concern as a parent, like the number one thing that's on your plate that you should be concerned about, is mental health of your kids, right? And if you don't make it part of the discussion, then you're probably not going to have them come to you and say, hey, mom, dad, I'm just, I don't know why, but when I have a chance to walk into a room, for instance, and there's people in there, I get really, insecure and afraid. They're not just going to blurt that out, but, if we make it part of the conversation, there's a chance that they will bring it up. And also, if I could add one more thing, if you expose something of yourself as a parent, if you show vulnerability, if you talk about what you're scared about, what you're frightened of, what intimidates you, I think that is incredibly powerful. It's an incredibly powerful message to your child or children that they can do it too. You don't want to ask them to do something that you wouldn't do.
100% agree.
I see a partnership in the future, you and I.
Look,
I'll be in the waiting room.
We can go on the road. I'm ready.
You know what? I'll work your waiting room, because I have been in many a psychologist and psychiatrist waiting room, and nobody talks there. I once turned to the person beside me. This was like one of the first times I went to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist has a front door where you sit and you wait, and then a back door, so you don't have to cross paths with people. And I said to her, that's just feeding into the stigma. No other kind of doctor does that.
That's
so
right.
One time I found myself in the waiting room with another woman or another person. And I said, hey, how you doing? So what brings you here? Oh my God, not the right question to ask.
How's your anxiety today?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, what meds are you on? I've got 20 milligrams of Lexapro, running through my head right now.
Look, we could definitely go on the road. Let's do it. I love it.
Michelle.
So next question we have is, can you talk about burnout? What causes it? How can we turn it around? And I think that could be, both at work and then also maybe burnout at home if the daily grind at home is tough too.
Yeah, there's been so many people who have just felt like, I just can't take just one more thing. And we saw so many different things that came out throughout the pandemic, from languishing, from quiet quitting, from all these things that were really just saying people are just done. They're like overwhelmed. And some people have more opportunity to take the breaks that they maybe need, and some people might not, depending on their life and circumstances. But overall, no matter where you are, going back to what I mentioned, giving yourself permission that it is okay to say, I need a break, I need to do something, I need to do something for me or for my family. And that might mean I need to take a day off, or I might need to do something on the weekend or not do something. I think that burnout comes from where we start to just feel like fatigued, overwhelmed, not wanting to do the things that even that we enjoy, we don't want to do it. That's usually signs of burnout. And if we keep pushing through, we crash. So oftentimes we need to take a break, recharge, refuel, whatever that means for you. Sometimes that's quality time, sometimes alone time, sometimes that's a vacation, sometimes that's just a staycation. But find something that will refuel you along the way.
I can't add anything.
Great. Yeah. Next question, kind of shifting a bit, is said, is it normal to have mourn? And hopefully, and whoever asked this question, please re-ask it, and hopefully I'm getting it right. Is it normal to have mourned a living parent, sibling, this one sister in another country, in order to not ruin your life, couple life, or destroy your inner joy? So to me, it seems like there may be some toxicity in the family, and they've kind of cut ties. Is that normal to do, or in those difficult relationships, maybe what's the best path to keep yourself protected, but also, mourn at that relationship?
Yeah, the therapist in me is like, right, if you do all the things that like you tried, you communicated, you reached out, you were open, you were vulnerable, and it was still toxic and it was harmful, yes, you do have to protect yourself. And sometimes protecting ourselves means distance, and sometimes means limiting that relationship. If you, and this is once again this part of me, if you just jump to, I'm going to cut this relationship off without some of the other work, you might lose out an opportunity to reconcile or to have further growth between you and the other person. But it's totally normal. A lot of us need space from people, even the people that we love. We might need to say, like, I need some space for you, and to be able to even figure out my own thoughts and be able to focus on me. Going back to being a pleaser, sometimes when we're a pleaser, we focus so much on other people and not ourselves, including family. So sometimes that space allows us to focus on ourselves.
Michael, Dr. George, thank you so much for
No,
joining us
no,
today. I
Debbie,
know
no.
all good things must come to an
No.
end. I know we have so many questions that I know are unanswered. As we have done in the past, we will try to take these questions and put them into a more generic form so that we can publish some of those answers so that everyone on the call has some sort of answer to their questions. So thank you both for joining us. Thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you to everyone who helped put this on. It was great. And I think all of us are better off for this event today.
I'm the attention seeker, so I'm getting the last word. I just want to remind everyone, no shortcuts exist to the top of a palm tree.
Gonna have to
All
think
right.
about
Well,
that one.
look, next time, I believe there'll be a next time. I'll come loaded with my quotes. I got you, Michael. I'm ready.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.